let's get into a couple of the tactical pieces here of the book. And again, I know we can't go all through all of it, which is why people should buy the book. What have you found to be the best starting point for someone that is either already doing some problem-based messaging, but probably not doing it very well, or we've sort of sold them on this idea of going from product-based to problem-based and prospect-based prospecting? Like, where's a good place to start start building out that script, whether that script is a cold email or an in-mail or a phone call?
Yeah, well, the beauty of this is like once you've actually nailed down your problems, like you then can just mold those into your method of prospecting. It oftentimes like this is the kind of starting point, and that's kind of why we in the book we start with like nail the elevator pitch, and actually the stuff that you nail from that just feeds into all of your other prospecting methods. One of the things exercises I do with salespeople is I kind of call it like, what does your prospect moan about over the dinner table on a night time to their partner? I ask them that question, and I'll say they're certainly not moaning to their husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever about, I don't have enough conversation intelligence on my sales teams right now. Like that's not what they're saying. What they are saying is, oh man, I'm super nervous about us hitting target this month. That's what they're moaning about over the dinner table, and their partner understands that. That you could say that to anybody in your world, and they would understand what that means. And that's the words and language that they use. I think anybody listening to this, ask yourself, what do your prospects moan about over the dinner table to their partner on an evening? And I almost can guarantee it's not the sort of words and language that you're using in your cold calls or cold emails, because I don't know, people think that their prospects aren't humans at the end of the day, and they don't use that language, when that is exactly the language that they use. Just start with maybe like 2, maybe 3, but ideally 2, just key problems that you think are, as far as problems that you help solve, like the 2 biggest problems that your prospects will feel and moan about on an evening when they're having dinner over the table. And look at the language that you're using and think about how they are saying those problems, and you'll actually write it down and think, that just looks like so simple, basic language. And that's the whole point, because that's the language that your prospects use. They don't use fancy jargon, technical speak. They use the same language that we all use when we're sharing our frustrations in life with people that are close to us. Yeah, that's the kind of, I guess, as a starting point is where I would start. And then how you then implement that into your different outreach. Obviously, there's more to that. There's frameworks and stuff, but really that's the starting point.
Like, I've noticed in some of your blog posts, I've seen this in the book as well. Like you did a post the other day, which you introduced a question that an SDR could use if you're getting a little resistance. You said, "Is it okay if I push back gently?" Like, that seems like it was like a thought out. You didn't just say, "Hey, do you mind if I share a couple different ideas or different perspectives?" Like, there was some real thought that went into that. And this question that you're just sharing here is like, what do they moan about with their partners at dinner? That's a similar question to like, what keeps you up at night? But it's not the same question. And I'm curious, did you purposely choose this form of that question? What do they moan about with their partners at the dinner table? Because it is a very different way of thinking about that question.
When you ask someone what keeps you up at night, I mean, one, that's quite an old-fashioned question I think prospects have become a bit tired of. But secondly, it's a question that they're asking themselves. And so when you're asking it themselves, then the temptation is that the language is different. Whereas, like, what are they moaning about to their partner about is they're telling their problem to somebody else. They're thinking of how their prospect would describe that problem to somebody else in a meaningful, understandable way. And the reason I say to their partner is like somebody who isn't a salesperson or who doesn't do that role. The idea behind it is it's about how would they say it out loud to somebody that they wanted to just share their problems with. But secondly, using language that is understandable and makes sense and is just clear and crispy. Because here's the thing, when it comes to prospecting, one of the biggest challenges anybody's got in prospecting is the tiny window of attention that they have from their prospects, which might be a glance of an email of a couple of lines, or they're busy doing something else when you cold call them, and you're trying to get them to really hone in on what it is that you're saying. That, like, it's really hard. Like, you've got such a small window of opportunity to capture their attention. If it's not clear and simple and crispy, then they're not gonna make sense of it. That's why I chose that kind of analogy, if you like.
Yeah, I was putting myself in that situation, like when you say, "What do you moan about?" at the dinner table with your partner, and I was imagining, like, what do I versus what keeps me up at night? Like, I do literally wake up in the middle of the night, and I start thinking about the business, and like a business version, like a Scott Talk problem is like in our CRM, our data isn't like well aligned, and that causes a lot of problems with getting data out of LinkedIn into the CRM. Like, and I know, like in my mind, that leads to other problems when it comes to contacting leads and doing other stuff. So it's like, in my mind, it makes perfect sense, and it becomes this puzzle I have to put together. If I use those words, and my wife is like, "Hey, it seems like something's bothering you at work," and I go, "Yeah, like our data alignment in our CRM just isn't working, and it makes it really hard to ingest the information from LinkedIn so we know how to do outreach to our prospects." She kind of is like, "Oh, you pass the salt?" It doesn't make sense. But if instead I'm like, "Yeah, it's like sometimes it's really hard because we spend all this time doing this data. We publish all these posts on LinkedIn, and we have a really hard time tracking who we should follow up with." That's how I would describe it to her.
Right.
And so I'm like, that makes perfect sense. And so this wording, the way you're thinking about it, it just informs, because if somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, do you have a hard time getting, figuring out who to prospect on when you do all these posts on LinkedIn?" I'm like, "Oh my God. Yeah." I was just thinking about that. I wasn't thinking about it in those words. I was thinking of it in Scott talk middle of the night, but it made me like quickly connect, like, this person understands my problem.